66 million years ago, dinosaurs dominated the Earth. Gigantic creatures in a world where the only battle that truly mattered was survival. However, their story did not begin that way. Long before the asteroid struck, about 235 million years ago, during the era known as the Triassic, the Earth was a vast mass of brown tones stretching across the entire planet. Even so, not everything was barren. The coasts became places where life flourished. There lived creatures such as Tanistropheus longobardicus, a reptile that lurked in shallow waters, and the rhynchosaurs, herbivorous reptiles that, although they seemed calm, had a feared predator, Luprosuchus fractus. However, on that occasion, the predator was not after the rhynchosaurs. Instead, it searched for an easier prey, a baby Marsuchus lilloensis. This tiny reptile possessed a unique ability. It could stand upright on two legs. But these small creatures were not born to fight, but to run and hide. All its siblings ended up becoming food. Now the future of its lineage depended on that single surviving Marsuchus, because from its descendants the dinosaurs would emerge. 1 year later, the Marsuchus had grown, although its size barely reached that of a pigeon. Its life was reduced to a single mission: survive. As a scavenger, it had to search for food remains left behind by other predators. But it was not an easy task, when for the other reptiles, it was as insignificant as an ant. For Marsuchus to evolve, it needed an unexpected ally, the Earth itself. 1 million years later, the planet entered a stage of intense volcanic activity. The eruptions released enormous amounts of carbon dioxide that caused prolonged rains for a long time. When they finally stopped, the world had changed completely. The ancient deserts transformed into forests full of trees. This new environment brought consequences. The rhynchosaurs began to disappear because their food now grew too high for them. While the kingdom of the ancient reptiles collapsed, another family began to rise: the dinosaurs. In a changing world, everything evolves. 12 million years after the rise of the rhynchosaurs, and almost at the end of the Triassic, the dinosaurs were ready to explore their new home. The first measured around 7 meters, and unlike the rhynchosaurs, they could easily reach their food. They consumed up to 25 kilograms of plants per day and needed abundant water to digest them. But on Earth, another dinosaur with a thirst for blood was also emerging: Procompsognathus triassicus, a small carnivore that, although at that time was barely the size of a chicken, belonged to a lineage that millions of years later would give rise to the feared Tyrannosaurus rex, whose name means Tyrant Lizard King. For now, it seemed insignificant, but with time an eternal rivalry between carnivores and herbivores would unfold. Millions of years later, the Earth continued transforming. Toward the end of the Triassic, new creatures dominated the skies: the pterosauria, flying reptiles that performed complex courtship rituals, in which the male impressed the female with movements and displays. But in the mountains, there were also terrestrial dinosaurs, such as Lilian sterni, a predator that represented a new power many would come to fear. The ancient reptiles still tried to mark their territory, but Lilian sternus no longer fled. However, at the end of the Triassic, the ground itself changed. The Earth began to fracture, and the continents started to separate. For reptiles and dinosaurs, it was impossible to escape an invisible enemy, an acidic mist that poisoned everything in its path. Millions of species died in what is now known as the End Triassic extinction. The reign of the ancient reptiles came to an end, leaving the path open for new species to dominate the planet. 2 million years later, one of the most famous eras in Earth's history began: the Jurassic. Life flourished again. The pterosauria survived thanks to their mastery of the sky, but on land, the dinosaurs had already taken their place. New herbivorous species appeared known as sauropoda, giants supported by 4 legs that could reach the tops of trees and snatch food from smaller animals. From the caves also emerged Heterodontosaurus tucki, a small dinosaur that did not fear confronting others when food was at stake. Although tiny, its lineage would be related to some of the largest dinosaurs that would exist. On another continent lay Eurasia, where river reptiles lived alongside dinosaurs that had also reached those lands. But in the oceans, changes were also happening. Among countless marine creatures appeared Plesiosauria, formidable predators. However, in the depths, something even more dangerous accumulated: methane. This gas, combined with the warming of the planet, caused devastating droughts and fires that affected many early species. Some dinosaurs, such as Massospondylus carinatus, disappeared after millions of years of existence. As time passed, the continents continued separating, and the dinosaurs kept expanding. 20 million years later, Mamenchisaurus hoquinensis appeared, one of the giant herbivores of the Jurassic. At the same time lived Anchiornis huxleyi, a small dinosaur resembling a chicken, considered one of the first with the ability to glide. Its wings still did not allow it to fly completely, but they marked the beginning of an important evolutionary change. 7 million years later, the sauropoda were even larger. At the same time, other species adapted to defend themselves appeared, such as Stegosaurus stenops, with plates and natural weapons that allowed it to face Allosaurus fragilis, predators with teeth sharp like saws. However, fighting them always represented a great risk. The world continued transforming, temperatures dropped, and snow began to cover the forests. In those frozen regions appeared Eudorannus whaley, an ancestor of Tyrannosaurus rex adapted to the cold thanks to its feather-covered body. Over time, the planet continued evolving and new eras emerged. The pterosauria grew larger and larger, dominating the skies, although with time, they would have rivals capable of flight, feathered descendants of carnivorous dinosaurs. 7 million years later, the first flower appeared. Thanks to insects such as beetles, these plants began spreading across the planet. However, nature also developed defenses, spines, toxins, and other mechanisms that caused the disappearance of some ancient herbivores that could not adapt. 15 million years later, many plants even reached the edges of the water, and new herbivores, such as Ankylosauria, adapted to the new world, capable of feeding on almost everything they found. But in the ocean, the seafloor fractured, causing eruptions that raised sea levels and transformed the geography of the planet. In the skies appeared a huge predatory pterosauria that descended to feed on dinosaurs, while in the sea giants, such as Mosasaurus hoffmanii, ruled. However, there was one dinosaur that ventured into the water, Spinosaurus aegyptiacus, one of the largest predators that ever walked on Earth. In that new world, the bigger you were, the greater your chances of survival. Spinosaurus could swim and hunt in the water. Dinosaurs spread across all continents, but their reign was destined to end. In space, an asteroid deviated from its orbit and began heading toward Earth. Meanwhile, life continued thriving. Herds of sauropoda roamed the plains, huge pterosauria dominated the sky, and predators watched every corner. 66 million years ago, dinosaurs of every kind existed, including some of the most famous today. Triceratops horridus, Ankylosaurus magniventris with its powerful club-shaped tail, and the feared Tyrannosaurus rex, a predator that, like any other creature, had to protect its family. But nothing could stop the inevitable. The asteroid struck Earth, causing the largest earthquakes and fires in the history of the planet. Catastrophes covered the world and buried countless species that once thrived on it. When everything ended, temperatures dropped drastically, and the dinosaurs could no longer adapt. Their destiny was to become history. Even the strongest fell, and thus the reign of the dinosaurs came to an end. However, millions of years later, they returned to us through their fossils, monuments of a lost world full of secrets. From their humble beginnings to their dramatic extinction, their story is still alive. And although many disappeared, not all died. Some survive to this day, the flying descendants we now know as birds. Thus, the journey that began millions of years ago continues beside us, reminding us that once the Earth was the kingdom of the dinosaurs and the dinosaurs